Likutei Sichos, Chelik Chaf Aleph, Volume 21, the third Sicha for Parsha Shmos. This Sicha will explain the true virtue of kabalos oil / bittul, specifically when it comes in a manner of expression with sophistication. As an introduction to familiarize ourselves with some of the concepts that we mentioned in the Sicha, to help us flow through the Sicha better, kabalos oil or bittul. What does the word kabalos oil mean? Literally, it means accepting a yoke, which is just like an animal, a cow, for example. It's used to plow a field, and a yoke is put on the animal's neck. It doesn't have a choice in the matter. It accepts it. It does it without understanding it, without knowing why. And that is synonymous with when a Yid has total and absolute subservience to Hashem's will and does it exclusively for that reason. Now, typically, kabalos oil is associated with an unsophisticated depiction of serving Hashem. But we'll see in the Sicha exactly what is the true kabalos oil. Now, there are three types of mitzvahs. We know that they're divided into three categories: mishpatim, edus, and chukim. Mishpatim are those mitzvahs that have what we call a human rationale, meaning that even the human mind can understand it, and perhaps even many of those mitzvahs, had the Torah not even instructed us to do so, we would have come to our own conclusion based on normal, typical human logic that this is the right thing to do. Another concept to be familiar with, we have sometimes in the Gemara, that the Gemara says regarding certain words in a pasuk, where it says, Al tikrei, do not read it as it appears, rather read it in another manner. For example, one that we recite every day, towards the end of davening, it says, Verav shloim banoich, and great is the peace that your banoich, your sons, bring. And the Gemara says at the end of brachas, Al tikrei banoich ela boinoich. Don't read the word to read banoich as in your sons, your children, but rather boinoich, those who are the ones who build the world. And one final thing, we know that anytime we have a metaphor in the Torah, for example, when you have the metaphor of Hashem's love to us is like the love of a father to his son, a parent to their child, the truth is that it's not that there is a love of a father to a son, a parent to a child, and this helps us appreciate that Hashem also has a love to us likewise, but rather it's the exact opposite. Because there is an innate love, an intrinsic love from Hashem to us, it gets expressed in this world, meaning through hishtalshelus, as it evolves down to this world, that there is an innate, an intrinsic love from a parent to a child. Let's go into the Sicha. So in our Parsha, in chapter 4, verse 22, is the first time in the Torah in which the Bnei Yisrael are referred to as Banim, as children of Hashem. It says, Beni Bechori Yisrael. Now typically, what does the word Bechor mean? A Bechor means the firstborn. But Rashi explains, in this context, what does it mean? It means something of high dignity, or like greatness, that Hashem is saying, this is my son, my great son. Now, in various places in Chazal, throughout the Gemara and Medrash, we find that the connection is made about the virtue of Bnei Yisrael, but and Hashem, the fact that they are children, but not just any children, but rather, following the verse in the prophet Hosea, chapter 11, verse 1, where it says, Kinar Yisrael v'yaveu, that for Yisrael, for Israel is like a nar, like a young child, and therefore I love him. And the Medrash, in fact, says that the mashal for this, the metaphor for it is, the parable, is that a king who had many children, which one does he love the most? Which one does he have the most expression of love to? That is the smallest of them. Now, of course, the question therefore becomes, if that's the case, if this is expression of the ultimate love of Hashem, as it appears in the Navi, how come here, where this the first time that Hashem sets the precedent of us being called banim to Hashem, children to Hashem, why does he use the term b'ni b'choiri, which is an expression of greatness, an expression of high dignity, versus just calling us banim, and it should mean that we are the youngest children? In order to understand this, we have to take a closer, deeper look to appreciate what indeed is this idea of the younger son being loved, like the Medrash says, more than all of them. In other words, what really is behind this? So, to understand this, let's make the contrast between a grown, mature child, a grown, mature son, versus the young son. You see, a grown, mature son, of course, the father loves him because it's his son. However, there is also other reasons. It's not exclusively that. There's other virtues for which he loves him. The developed virtues in the child, in the son, as he grows older and matures, is that he develops character, both in intellect and also in as an emotional character, and that brings out a greater love, a great love from the father. Versus when there is an ava, a love, to a small child, a small son, who doesn't possess any definable virtues, that is a ava atzmis, an innate, an intrinsic love from the parent to the child. True, as we said, also in a grown, mature son, there is an ava, and it's an ava atzmis, it's an innate love, but it's also coupled with the son's actual virtues. Whereas in a ben katan, in a small son, it is clear and obvious that the entirety of the ava, of the love, is exclusively because of the fact that he is his son. Now, the fact that this is so by a father and son, naturally speaking, down here, is really in truth because this is the way it is lamaila, as we said in the introduction. And the truth is that because it's so lamaila by Hashem in his relationship with us, therefore it expresses itself, it evolves, and it comes to be also so in down-to-earth real life. Meaning that when a Yid serves Hashem, and there is a obvious, revealed virtue because the person accomplishes in his service of Hashem, then the love from Hashem to us is triggered because of some obvious reason. It's not innate, it's not an atzmizdika one, it's not an intrinsic love, which is much deeper, but it actually seems to stem from an expression of the son and his virtues. Versus if you say just the mere fact that Hashem loves us, which is an innate love, notwithstanding if the person, or regardless, if the person has any whatsoever virtues, that is clear and obvious that the love is because of the fact that we are chelik elikam imal mamish, that we are part of Hashem, we're just one with Hashem, and that's why there is an intrinsic love. Now, where is this love truly expressed? When a person in his avodah, and here's where the Rebbe will make the case, in the person's avodah to Hashem, meaning in their growth and in their sophistication of their developing their connection with Hashem through Torah learning and through the performance of mitzvahs and through honing their emotional skills, their midos, that's where when a person is quote-unquote katan, a person holds himself small, a person is like a small child, in their avodah, that's when we have the true love from Hashem. The true love, which typically, as we said before, is associated with that innate, intrinsic love that Hashem has for us. But when a person has a sophistication in it, in his avodah, and so to speak, feels himself, that's when you, so to speak, lose that type of love. What does this all mean? In other words, how could it be that we, as we just said, that you can serve Hashem, you can have, so to speak, a sophistication in your connection to Hashem, and yet still to feel like a katan, to feel like as if, quote unquote, you're small, and therefore have that advantage, have that virtuous love that Hashem has to us, like one has to a small child? The answer is that the true idea of kabalos oil, what is the true idea of kabalos oil? We see it actually in a small child. A small child, by definition, doesn't have any sophistication. A small child, by virtue of him being a small child and not understanding everything, follows the directions of his parents, listens to his parents, does what they want him to do, not because he appreciates it, but because of kabalos oil. So therefore, when a person serves Hashem, even when they're doing all the, or perhaps especially when they're doing all the Torah mitzvahs, but why are they doing it? They're doing it because they have total and absolute kabalos oil, absolute subservience to Hashem. That brings out the deepest level of ava, as we said, the deepest level of love, that Hashem loves them because of them being quote-unquote katan, even though there is an obvious gadlus, there's an obvious greatness and virtue because they do Torah mitzvahs. But we need to still understand is, it seems that theoretically there is a greater maila, there's a greater virtue in remaining, meaning remaining in the level of katnus, of being small, because we said small versus big. As we said in the beginning, when someone is a small child, when one is a small child, there is an innate ava, versus when one has already maturity and has some sophistication, then the ava is not exclusively innate. It also is because of those reasons. So perhaps it would have made sense theoretically that we should all remain in that level. But still, what do we see? That Hashem is the one who instilled the nature of things, that we have to continuously grow from small to big. And it's obvious that this cannot be a factor to diminish our love in the eyes of Hashem, because why would Hashem do that? Why would Hashem do that? But yet on the one hand, we want to have that expression of love, that expression of the ultimate connection to Hashem. And yet, Hashem made it so that we have to continuously grow more and more and more in our avodah, which includes learning, studying, understanding, appreciating, and working on our self-refinement. So how do we reconcile these two? And therefore, says the Rabbi, we must conclude that when a Yid grows in Torah and mitzvahs, not only does it not diminish this great virtue of being a katan, but rather it actually enhances this. How is that possible? So the answer is because when a Yid serves Hashem using his intellect and his emotions, it's not chas v'shalom that this is contrary to the inyan of bittul, to the idea of bittul and kabalos oil, but rather the exact opposite, rather the contrary, that this is the greatest expression of one's bittul to Hashem. That meaning, the mere fact that the person serves Hashem through employing his intellect and his emotions, and all along he tries to understand more and to be better and to grow in Yiddishkeit, this is the ultimate expression of his bittul to Hashem. Why? Because what is the reason that he's doing it? What is the true trigger for this? Is because this is what Hashem's desire is. This is what Hashem wants from us. Hashem wants us to serve him in such a manner that we continuously grow in our understanding of Torah. We continuously grow in developing our emotional attributes, and so on. This is similar along the lines of the difference between the three categories of mitzvahs, as we mentioned in the introduction. Ultimately, when a Yid performs the mitzvahs that fit into the category of mishpatim, it's not that the Yid does it because they understand that this is a good thing to do. It's not that we do it motivated by the fact that this is something that we appreciate is the right thing to do, but rather it was Hashem's will that this category of mitzvahs we do because He's told us to do so. We perform the mitzvah, we follow these rules because this is what He wants us to do. But how does He want us to do it? He wants us to do it in a manner that we have an appreciation of it. In other words, our appreciation of it is not what motivates us. Our motivation is our subservience to Hashem. Our trigger and catalyst for why we're doing the mitzvahs, because this is what Hashem wants. But how are we supposed to do the mitzvah? What manner is this mitzvah supposed to be performed in a manner of understanding, in a manner of appreciation, in a manner in which one has, so to speak, a special joy in it, because it also connects to the human understanding. So from all this, we can conclude that when a Yid endeavors to grow in his Torah and mitzvahs, in his seichel and midos, in his intellect and his emotional virtues, it's not that it diminishes the aspect of the innate connection that we have to Hashem, which is expressed in the ben katan, in the small child, as we mentioned in the beginning, but rather the contrary, that it actually makes it grow even more. This actual point we see in the end of the siyum of Maseches Brachos. In the end of Maseches Brachos, what is Maseches Brachos? The first Masechta in the whole Shas. And as the Chachamim explain, the Mefarshim explain, what is the reason that this was chosen to be the first Masechta in Shas? Because this begins with the idea of kabalos oil, as it speaks about the laws of Kriya Shema, reading of Shema, which the whole idea of Shema is lekabel oil malchus shamayim. So therefore, this was set as the beginning, because the prerequisite for everything, for all mitzvahs, for all laws in the Torah, is kabalos oil. Yet, following the rule that's actually mentioned in Maseches Brachos, that hakol hoylech achar hachitum, that everything follows the conclusion, we have to look at the end of the Masechta to really appreciate what this Masechta is really all about. Because that's where kind of the main point gets summarized at the end. But if we look at the end, what does it talk about? So it concludes with the Gemara says, Talmidei Chachamim ein lahem menucha, that true Talmidei Chachamim, true students of the Torah, do not have any rest, not in this world, not in the world to come, as it says in the verse, Yelchu michayil l'choyil, go from strength to strength. That means they continuously grow, continuously move forward more and more and more. And then it concludes and it says, Talmidei Chachamim marvim shalom ba'olam, that the Chachamim, Talmidei Chachamim, they bring and they increase the peace in the world. As it says, V'chol b'nayich limudei Hashem, all your children are students of Hashem, V'rav shloim b'nayich, and great is the peace that your children bring into the world. And then the Gemara concludes, Al tikrei b'nayich, don't read this word to appear as banoich, your sons, ela banoich, your builders, meaning the Chachamim, Talmidei Chachamim, who build the world, they enhance the existence of the world, they are the ones who bring peace to the world. So on the one hand, you see that it's talking about kabalos oil in the beginning of the Masechta, but yet it concludes with the idea of personal growth. Talmidei Chachamim, who study. What is the inherent virtue, the inherent idea of studying? That you grow, you understand more and more. It's a personal thing. So the question is, how do these two go hand in hand together? Says the Rebbe, that's the answer. Like we said before, the true expression of kabalos oil is when, a meaning of the fear of Hashem, is when a person learns, he makes an effort to elevate himself another level and another level, higher and higher and higher, because this is what Hashem wants. Not because it feels good for him, not because this is exciting for him, but because he's excited and it feels good for him because this is what Hashem wants. And this also explains why the Gemara brings the entire pasuk. Because if you think about it, it would seem that the main focus of this passage in Gemara is the end of the pasuk, that where it says V'rav shloim banoich, and I'll take your banoich ala banoich. But why does it bring the beginning of the pasuk, V'chol banoich limudei Hashem? The answer is because it's emphasizing that this is talking about banoich, your sons, the idea of ben, as we said in the beginning, that intrinsic, inherent, innate connection between a ben and the father, in this case between a yid and Hashem. But the end of the pasuk, where we say banoich should not be read, but rather banoich, following the rule as we mentioned in the introduction, then whenever it says al tikre, do not read it as it appears, but rather read it this way, it's not canceling chas v'sholem, the literal appearance of the word, the literal meaning of the word. Rather, it adds another layer of understanding, a deeper layer of meaning. And in this case, what it's telling us really, and that's why it brings also the beginning of the pasuk to highlight this, to emphasize this, is that all this, meaning the idea of Beinoich, that you have a Talmid Chacham that's building the world. How is he building the world? Through his learning of Torah, which requires understanding, requires a feeling of self, using one's intellect. It requires also, when he's working on his virtues, on his midos, requires a self-enhancement. It's about the self. So the Gemara is hinting that all this does not negate, it's not opposed to the idea of kabalos oil, which is inherent in the idea of ben Katan, as we mentioned in the beginning of the Sicha. But rather that this is the truest, the ultimate expression of ben. This is banoich, which has the aspect of banoich. And that brings, meaning the deepest virtue of the idea of ben expresses itself specifically in the Talmid Chacham that goes from strength to strength. So, in other words, on the surface, it seems like bittul, kabalos oil, and the idea of learning are two separate things, or maybe perhaps even two opposing things. But rather, when we get to it and we see the truth in it, then we appreciate that, in fact, the true aspect of ben, the true aspect of bittul and kabalos oil gets expressed dafka specifically in one's personal learning, one's personal growth when it's done on the premise of this kabalos oil. A real life expression of this is also visible in the attributes of an average healthy child. Like we said in the beginning, your typical child has kabalos oil. He doesn't understand, he doesn't know, but yet what do we see? What are the true attributes of a child? Number one, they're always asking questions. They always want to understand. They always want to appreciate what's going on. In other words, they're always constantly learning and trying to grow. Another thing is that they really can't sit still. You know, an older person, a mature person, could be very comfortable where they are, stay even stagnant, right? They need to do something to motivate themselves. But children are inherently motivated. They're always moving, they're always going, they're always doing. They're always busy trying to get things done. Why? Because this is the expression of what we just said. That the true aspect of ben, the true aspect of kabalos oil is when you endeavor to learn, because Hashem wants you to do so. You endeavor to grow, as the Gemara says, Yelchu Michael Achoil, quoting that verse. So in short, because of them being a child, meaning not as mature and sophisticated, that's why they have an innate desire for information and to grow, to move, and continues to grow. Now we can appreciate why Hashem chose in our Parsha to express the virtue of Bnei Yisrael specifically by saying Bnei B'chayre Yisrael, and not referring to them as Bnei HaKatan or Nar Yisrael, as we asked in the beginning. Why? Because as we explained, the true expressed virtues of Bnei Yisrael is not when you diminish the greatness of Bnei Yisrael. On the contrary, when one endeavors to learn Torah, one has their accomplishment, this is and this reveals the deepest level of greatness of the aspect of Katan that's there. However, in Hosea, from which we quoted the verse, from which we asked the question, over there it's not talking about the greatness of Bnei Yisrael. Over there the focus is specifically on the love of Hashem. When we're talking about the love of Hashem, there truly the ultimate expression of love, of the deepest level of love, is when you mention it raw, basic, as it is, Nar Yisrael, that this is the young child. So in short, what we get from the Sicha is that the true ultimate expression of kabalos oil and bittul is when a Yid endeavors for sophistication and appreciation in Torah and mitzvahs, and there comes out the true ultimate maila of that innate connection, that intrinsic connection, that atzmi is the connection between a Yid and Hashem, which is expressed in the idea of Katan.